All right, Ian,
Pat.
we have to talk about Pawn Stars. Before we really get into it, I had to tell you, Ian will be leading this conversation because um, I appeared on the show in 2012, which I'm now regretting that decision before this conversation starts, and I cannot talk about how the show's produced in any way or what goes into the show behind the scenes. I'm precluded from speaking about that due to a NDA. So Ian's gonna have to talk about it. But Ian, what was on?
Well, I'm not going
Pawn
to bring
Stars?
up anything about how the show works behind the scenes. On Pawn Stars, a fellow Rich, what's the last name? Lech.
Yeah, Rich, who we spoke about on the show before. I've met him at conventions. I've communicated with him before. A week before the what we're talking about was being sold on the show, the sealed Super Mario Brothers sticker sealed Super Mario Bros. He would email me and we discussed it before the sale happened. We were talking about the sort of the graded game scene. And we have a disagreement on it, but he was always an affable fellow in person, and he's at these conventions now.
So he took the sticker sealed, WATA graded Mario,
That sold for to them to their group of three people for
$100,150.
Yep, back in was that February.
And took it into Pawn Stars to have them look at it. He was asked up flat out what he was hoping to get for it, and his answer was $1 million.
And Rick gave that always that good look, like he gives that little look like, huh? That little like,
Yeah.
he furrows his brow.
Which I agree that's an insanely high amount to ask immediately, especially when just not even a year ago it was purchased for $100,000, and that was considered crazy at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So Rich calls over Chumlee. He doesn't know, he knows a bit more about it. Doesn't necessarily think it's worth that much, but they're aware that video game collecting is a thing. They're aware that these games have value. They're not dismissing outright the fact that these things can go for, a considerable amount of money.
They've had stuff in the shop before. They've had an NWC card or two. They've had a Virtual Boy. They've had a big, that big ceramic Mario statue you see from time to time. They've had some of this merchandise in the store.
So they know that these things can go for 5-digit figures. But they, he even said he was unaware of them ever going for six
or even seven,
seven, which is what he was asking. So they called in an expert and they looked at the graded copy and saw WATA on there, and they called in Dennis, the head of WATA grading, to come in and look at it. So he comes in and looks at it, and he says immediately that he remembers that copy. And
he said it was the most significant piece of video history to pass through WATA in terms of that's what he said.
Yeah, which is a big statement, but I mean, in terms of just the realm of WATA, it's probably true. I mean,
versus an NWC, you can make a case that that's more important.
I think you have to go based on
the significance of the game,
the
itself.
History, and I get where they're going with this.
That's not the problem with the segment,
right?
So Dennis mentions that he's aware that there was a $300,000 offer for the game. He said that, not Rich, which we'll get into.
Which he says was turned down, and he says the sky's the limit. The segment concludes with Rick. That's his name.
Rich.
The guy.
Rick's the shop owner. Yeah.
Rick asking it. Says thank you. I've learned a lot. Dennis leaves. Asks the Rich again what he wants for it. Rich states, firmly $1 million. Rick doesn't make any sort of offer on it, and that ends the segment.
It's on their Facebook. It's on YouTube, but it's a shortened version. The full one's on the Pawn Stars Facebook group.
The whole time I'm watching it, I feel like I'm watching. There's nothing organic about it. I feel like I'm watching the making of $1 Million Game. The making of is how I see it. Dennis is obviously the head of WATA. And he is definitely a person to talk to about these matters. But video game collecting is so small right now in terms of this sealed graded collecting that, and I like Dennis, but if these games look good, if they build up that this is worth something, obviously WADA benefits because then more people are going to be interested in getting their games graded.
They'll use the service.
Right. I don't believe there's impropriety. I don't think he's getting there. It's not like he's getting a cut of it, but it definitely benefits them to come out and make it look as attractive as possible and to build up the value and the worth of the game.
Sure, because then anyone else will say, well, I might have a game I'll send into WADA.
Right.
And they'll obviously there's a charge for that, and that's how they make their business, and so more people do it. I don't think people watching this show is the target audience that's going to happen though, but it's obviously positive if people know about it, obviously.
Right. So it came across as a commercial, and I gather that that's both specifically in terms of WADA. I don't think he did anything more to make it seem that way, but just having them on there.
Well, it's just funny when Rick says, I'm going to contact WADA.
Yeah.
WADA's not in Nevada.
Well, no,
Yeah.
but I mean, I figure, it's what else do you get? I feel like if he doesn't know, he flat out says he doesn't know.
Sure.
I think he looks at the package, goes, I know that they are the head of, they're the number one in grading right now. We're going to use them. It would have benefited them immensely to have pulled in anyone else or a second opinion, I think,
well,
to make it seem less like an advertisement.
Well, there's just, you want to use the C word, but there's a couple C words we can use, but there's obviously a conflict of interest. If the expert
sure
brought in to talk about a valuable game benefits from saying the game is valuable because people might use the service.
Yes.
And he can profit from it. It's a huge conflict of interest.
So at the end of the day, I realize what that show is for, and it's never very realistic. Pat can't talk about that, but I'm sure they obviously sweeten the show up to make it as entertaining as possible. But yes, I definitely don't think WADA should have been the one called in to comment on the worth of sealed WADA games.
Well, what was interesting to me when I first saw it was I asked myself, because the potential seller, Rich, he's not the one that mentioned he turned down $300,000. It was Dennis.
Sure.
If they were being ethical, the guy running the grading service, how does he know about the inner workings of a private deal that did or did not happen?
Well, and that goes back to what I said before. This is all too small. It's all way too small.
So I don't want to, I like Dennis. I do like Rich as well, even though we've had contentious emails. But it's not even like, it stinks of collusion. It is collusion when the person running a grading company is aware of the inner workings of deals of a game you graded, and now you're on a show discussing this. It's so weird that the seller didn't say that I turned down $300,000. You know what I mean? You should be if you're just a grading service, you should be divorced from any pricing going on or anything like that. You should have nothing to do with that.
I mean, I'm sure
I understand if you're the expert to talk about it,
and
but
I feel like they would know. I just, like I said, I feel like the whole thing could have been avoided by pulling in someone else.
Well, yes. The expert shouldn't have something potentially to gain from the sale of an item.
Yes.
When they bring in the history guy with the beard, the guy with the hat that comes in, he just runs the museum, in the county. Yeah. Like he's not buying and selling that stuff, or he has no business. I guess if you go in the gift shop, you can buy a little trinket. That's about it. But like, it's not directly connected to the item, like the Abe Lincoln signature or what have you. So I somehow have eyes and ears when it comes to this stuff. I get messages about things that happen when this stuff happens. So I got a private email from a source that had something more to say about it, and so What was said in this message was their $300,000 offer for the Super Mario Bros. Was not a cash offer. It was a trade for a ton of low-level ungraded comics. That's the message I got. I cannot substantiate that. I can't corroborate it. So I put in my little journalism hat, and I emailed.
The hat with the press card on the side.
Oh, it said press on it?
Yeah.
So I did my little journalistic integrity in the podcast, even though this is a podcast, And so I sent an email to Rich, since we've emailed in the past. Rich the seller, one of the 3 owners. Remember, there's 3 owners of the Super Mario Brothers. That wasn't mentioned on the show. I'm not sure that, I just thought that was interesting. So I sent him an email.
Well, then it starts to look more like an investment.
Yes. But I mean, yeah.
No, I'm just saying that's why.
It's like, hey, I found this graded slab game in my closet. What's it worth? Obviously, that's not what's going on. So I asked him questions. Did you sign an NDA to appear on the show? Could you discuss anything else? He said, I'm sorry, I cannot talk about that. I hope you understand. I asked about the offer that was turned down at $300,000. Was that a cash offer or trade value equivalence? I heard it was for comic books and not cash. Was it? His answer was, we had multiple offers for the game. I can confirm that one of them did include a trade for some comic books. We did not share any of the information about the values of offers that we have received with Dennis prior to the show. He did say that. He didn't ask me, though, if that $300,000 offer was the comic one, though. On the Pawn Star segment, he didn't say anything when Dennis said that.
So he didn't share that with him until Dennis showed up for the show.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's.
There's 2 other people in that group. He said who would share that information then? It's just a weird thing. All right, but I'm going to take his word for it.
What I read that as is Dennis found out at the show.
How? Oh.
That's what I'm reading it as.
That's what you're.
I'm reading it as.
So it was.
I'm reading it as I'm reading it as he was told at the show.
At this Pawn Star.
At the Pawn Star, something that wasn't shown on camera, which is not as bad. He's gonna find out this information. Okay. So I don't find that to be nearly as bad. But because, like I said, CCG guys know what their fucking books are worth.
Sure.
That's I don't have such a problem with that. It does not look good the way they filmed that necessarily.
Sure.
Then.
Yeah, Rich should have said that.
Yes, Rich should have been the one to say that.
I want to know, and this got away from my question, was that $300,000 offer the comic book offer? Because if it's a trade value offer, that's not cash. That's not a cash value anymore. A trade value is always lower than a cash offer.
Yeah.
Always, because it's not liquid. You're not guaranteed to get the return on the trade value. You know that working in a store, you deal with trade-ins. Mm-hmm. That's why you have to offer whatever, 50%, 40%. So to me, if it's a $300,000, if it's 100 cash, $200, 100,000 trade, whatever it is, that could maybe only be $150,000 cash equivalency. We have no idea what it really is, because you almost never spend the seller almost never spends, or excuse me, the potential buyer almost never spends the amount of money cash wise versus the trade value, because it always appreciates down the line, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that to me is something I want to know. And then I asked, do you expect your appearance and showing the game on the show to possibly increase the interest and/or value? If so, why? Very polite questioning from me, like it's a freaking Scantron test. Yes, of course, I hope it would increase the interest of that particular game. However, my main incentive was to get more people to see video games as a medium of art and not just a toy. I've always loved to share my passion about video game collecting with anyone who will listen, and hopefully this appearance will introduce our hobby to some people that may not have realized that classic video games were a collectible with a capital C.
Yeah, I mean, it's video game collecting in the commercial.
I'll just say this to Rich, that video games haven't been looked at as toys for like
your
30 years.
Computer keeps making noises.
Some weird alerts going on. So that's all I'm going to say. It's not the worst thing in the world that they're on Pawn Stars. I just think that there's just some issues for how it was presented that I think anyone watching it might ask some similar questions that we asked. That's the nicest way I could probably put it.
Sure.